This isn't President Biden's, first rodeo when it comes to debt ceiling debates. What type of negotiator was he in his last debates in 2011, 2013, and in 2021?
Yeah, as you mentioned, President Biden has been around the block a few times. He's almost the same age as the debt limit itself. The first debt limit increase was in 1939. But Biden was born in 1942. Uh, and he's very much an institutionalist. His whole belief and his whole case for being president is that he wants to show that small d democratic government can work. And so he's been in Washington, D.C. for a half a century. And so he's cultivated a lot of relationships, and he believes in the power of the Senate and kind of working together. And so in 2011, he was deployed by the Obama administration to work with then Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell to kind of reach a deal after other avenues of negotiations did not prove fruitful. And I think the takeaway from a lot of Democrats was that Biden gave away too much to McConnell, and they said, he gave away kind of some spending cuts, some sequestration, and other items that they wish that he didn't relent on. And so I think that it's a lesson for Biden and some of his close advisors and some of Democratic leaders that they don't want to go through that process again. But at heart, Biden is a negotiator, and you saw him earlier this year go to an event in Kentucky on infrastructure, and McConnell was there. That he kind of, the lines of communication, even if it's not publicly stated, the lines of communication are still open to try to reach a deal. And so as kind of this debt ceiling impasse progresses, expect those private lines of communication to remain open, and that he's still looking for a deal at the end of the day.
I do want to pivot now to some key dates in the future. What should we be looking out for next?
Yeah. So I mean, tomorrow is the State of the Union. It's a moment that's tens of millions of people tune in and see what President Biden says where the country has gone and where it's going to head. And so I think one key thing to watch here is that, does he lay out a picture of the debt limit or the debt ceiling that's very partisan, that's kind of contrasting him versus Republicans, or does he kind of provide an opening for negotiations? Is he a little more deferential to McCarthy? And is he more willing to kind of like not highlight the differences in hopes of seeking some sort of agreement down the line? So I think that's an important area, because a lot of this is about leverage and a lot of this is about posturing in the debt ceiling, and how Biden kind of presents this to millions of people will be instrumental in kind of seeing how things progress in the near term. Now, beyond that, I think another date to watch is March 9th. This is when President Biden releases his fiscal year 2024 budget proposal. And here he's going to kind of give his vision of government spending for the next year, as well as for kind of the decade ahead. And he wants to kind of present some sort of contrast of what he sees as important spending versus what the concerns he has with Republicans over some spending cuts. And soon thereafter, Republicans are hoping to release their own budget, maybe in March, but potentially in April as well. And this is a very critical point for Republicans. They want to link the debt ceiling with some concessions on the budget. And so what we could see in a fiscal year 2024 budget for Republicans is laying out exactly what they envision those budget cuts to entail. And the hope then for Republicans is that they could have a vote on their budget. And if they can get 218 votes, that's really a bolster for Kevin McCarthy that says, like, you know what, I'm negotiating here and I can present 218 votes to pass some sort of increase in the debt ceiling with these sorts of spending cuts. But if he isn't able to, and if Republicans aren't able to pass their budget through the House, then it's a signal that McCarthy really doesn't have the votes to negotiate. And then you're going to look at some maybe alternative options here from Democrats, like a discharge petition. Another time to watch is in April 18th, which is tax day. A lot of people are unsure when the X date will happen, but we'll get a better picture of the X date when kind of tax returns come in and get a better sense of kind of the receipts incoming to the Treasury. And if it's kind of a weaker than expected receipt, then the X date could come sooner rather than later. And that's important for what I mentioned was the discharge petition, which is this maneuver to bypass House leadership and pass something on the Senate floor with just 218 votes. But it's a very complicated process. It takes about 3 months. And if the X date comes sooner rather than later, then they need to start the discharge petition perhaps as soon as March. And if the X date comes soon and they don't have the discharge petition started, then that stops one avenue for increasing the debt ceiling. And so these are kind of the dates in the near term. I also kind of even look further beyond the X date. For all the talk about the X date, whether it's going to be June, July, or August, there's a good chance that Congress could have a short-term suspension of the debt limits until the fall, and that's in a way for Republicans that would line up potential default with kind of the start of FY24, which begins on October 1st. And so October 1st is when the new fiscal year begins, and that could be a time where there is actually further negotiations on the debt limit. And it could also be coming at a time when there's potentially a recession and when the presidential election, the Republican primary at least, is up and running. And so I think that's another date to watch in terms of how the timing can play out for this debt limit crisis.